All right, I'm Charlie Craven, and today I'm going to tie for you a little fly called a Thinmint. This is an increasingly popular pattern out here in the Rockies. This fly came from the Pacific Northwest and was originally intended as a stillwater fly, but is a very popular Rocky Mountain pattern for a couple of reasons. While it looks like a bugger and fishes like a bugger, it's a little more detailed in the tying process, but also I think that's what makes it work a little better as well. You can see it's got a three-color tail. Olive, brown, and black. It's got a peacock body, and then a furnace hackle. And furnace is brown with a black center, so it's pretty iridescent along the center edges. You can see as I rotate that fly, you can see that hackle's got multicolor to it. So a multicolored fly. And one of the cool things about this fly is it's a great dark colored streamer, but because it's got a few different colors in it, it kind of can eliminate some of that process, color process, as far as kind of working through different colors to see what color the fish might be on any given day. The other nice thing about this fly is while it's a big bugger, we're going to tie it in a size 6 here. It's not a terribly big streamer. This is a fly that you can throw on a 4-weight, even a 3-weight, honestly. You don't need a big rod to throw this fly, but gosh, it still works pretty darn well. We still sell tons of these in the shop. This is a really good little fly, and sort of a good way to mix it up. And it's, obviously, it was designed as a stillwater fly, so it works well in lakes as well. I can see the sort of crawdad influence between the color variations on it. But I'm going to show you how to tie it. And this fly is in my streamer book as well, so if you don't have the streamer book, you should probably go out and buy that right now. I'll wait for a second while you do that. Make yourself a note so that you don't forget. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to take this one out of the vise, and I'm going to start with a Tiemco 5262 in a size 6, and I'm going to just knock the barb down on it. And I'm going to put a 5/32 gold tungsten bead onto this hook, and then I'll chuck them up in my vise, like so. And once I've got that bead on there, I'm going to come in with some 6/0 uni thread. This is just plain black. And 6/0 uni sounds small, but 6/0 uni is bigger than Danville 6/0 by a long shot. It's about twice as big. So 6/0 uni is really about the same size as 3/0 monocord, 135 denier. It's a nice polyester thread. It doesn't stretch much. It works really well for these streamers. So while it sounds small, it's really not. And that's, honestly, I think it's too big for most of your dry fly stuff. So don't let them fool you. But I'm going to start that thread just behind that bead. And I'm going to make a nice thread base and just dress the shank all the way back to the bend of the hook. Just one turn behind the other, so that my thread is hanging about even with where the barb was. And to start the tail, I'm going to take, this is about the top half or third of an olive marabou feather. And I'm going to take and just bundle this up into a little bunch. I'm going to measure it about a hook shank length long. One of the questions I get asked on measuring is, how do you just hold that up there? And it's always the same length. The trick to this is, so when I pick this up, you can see this is too long now. See how I can roll my fingers, and if I put my fingers in the middle of the screen, see how I can roll my fingers forward and back and adjust the length of that feather? All I'm doing is holding the tips at the bend and then closing my fingers up to the eye. And that gives me a measurement. Then I'll butt them up in my fingers, and I'll tie that clump in at the bend just with 4 or 5 turns. I'll wet that down just a bit. So that's about a shank length long, which is a pretty standard streamer tail length. You don't want to go much longer than that. Now I'm going to take a brown feather that I've done the same thing with. It's about the top half of a brown feather. I'm going to measure it to the same length as the olive, hold it in place, and tie it down right on top. And then I'll take my black feather and do the same thing. So I'll come in and lay that in so it's the same length as the first two, and tie it on top of the clump. So I've got a multicolored tail, olive, brown, black. I've left these butt ends on here so that I can use those as the underbody. So I'm going to lift these up out of the way, and I'll just spiral wrap my thread up to just short of the bead. I'll let my thread sort of push those down around the hook, and I'll bind them down again here at the front with a little band of thread. And then I can trim those stubs out. You can see how those stubs are sort of pushed up against the back of the bead there. As I wrap over them, you can see how I can tuck them down into the back edge. Now I'm just going to spiral wrap my thread back over that Marabou, maybe back and forth a couple times just to smooth things out. And we've built a nice underbody for the fly. So the next thing I'm going to tie in is a piece of brassy sized copper wire. And honestly, the color of this doesn't make a huge difference. It's barely going to show. We're going to use this to reinforce our hackle. So I'm going to tie this in back here toward the bend, right up to the base of the tail. Oh, hold on, I forgot a piece. I'll show you how to tie that wire in twice, just because I feel like you wanted to see it again. But before I tie that wire in, I'm going to put some flash in the tail. So you can use regular Herl Flashabou, or what I've got here is Mirage Lateral scale, and this has got a little crinkle to it, just a little bit more texture than Flashabou. Flashabou is completely acceptable. But what I'll do here is I'm going to tie that in at the center of its length, and I'm going to take two of those strands and hold them against the far side and wrap back over them so that they're on the side of the tail there. You want to make sure that they're not pointing too far down. Should be right about centered. And then I'll pull the front ends back along my near side and wrap over them so that they're along the near side of the tail. Then I'll trim them off just a little bit proud of the tail. You can kind of adjust that length. There we go. Like so. So that's just going to add a little bit of flash to the tail. Then I'm going to tie in a piece of wire. This might seem familiar to you. I'm going to take this piece of wire and catch it here on the back end and wrap over it to the base of the tail. And then I'll take one more strand of this Mirage tinsel, which is going to become our rib. I'm sorry, I said Mirage tinsel. It's Mirage color, but this is lateral scale. So I'm going to tie in a whole strand of this. So I want the full length, and I'll lock that back out of the way. And I'll bring my thread forward again. Now for the body, we're going to use Peacock Herl, and this is just strung Peacock Herl. This is one of the prettiest materials you can use if you've got good Peacock Herl. It makes such a nice, pretty, juicy body. And I've got 10 or 12 strands is what I'm going to shoot for here. I'm going to pick out about 10 or 12 strands of this Peacock Herl, and I'm going to cut the ends so that they're even, and I'm tying them in by the tip ends. I'll lay those up on top of the hook. I'm just going to wrap back over them all the way to the base of the tail. And then I'll come forward again, just anchoring that down. So we've got this nice rope of peacock. Now before I start to wrap that, I'm going to put a pretty healthy coat of head cement on that shank, and that'll soak into that Marabou and that peacock that we've got tied down. It's just going to lock everything down in place so the fly is more durable. I'm going to pick up all my Peacock Herl, and as I come around with the first turn, I'll sort of rock this clump back and forth, and that'll get it to spread out a bit. You can see that one turn took up a pretty good portion of the hook shank, and that'll just help me with my coverage. You can see also, see how my Marabou butts taper down slightly as they get toward the front? Well, nicely and conveniently, the Peacock Herl fattens up as we get closer to the butt end. So you'll see that taper sort of will disappear as I get up to the bead. Once I get to the bead, I'm going to tie this off behind the bead with several tight turns behind the Peacock Herl. I see a lot of videos these days where folks will tie something off with one turn behind the material and two in front of it. Those two in front of it don't do anything. Stop doing that. I don't know. I'm not going to name names, but cut it out. That's just dumb. Cut those off. If you don't have the wraps behind the material, they don't cross the material and they're not doing anything. You're just adding bulk. So cut that out. Now, here's a little tip on perking up this Peacock Herl body. You can take your dubbing brush and sort of pick out anything that you got bound down along the way. Just run my dubbing brush along it, and that'll sort of juicy that up a little bit. You can see how nice and consistent that body is. And then we're going to take our piece of lateral scale and we're going to start to rib it forward through the body. Just nice evenly spaced turns. We'll tie it off behind the bead as well. Couple turns and I fold it back and catch it a couple more times. So we've just got a little highlight there through the body. And then finally, I'm going to take my hackle. So what I'm going to use for the hackle on this fly is a Metz Furnace saddle feather. And this is a natural color. It's got that nice dark iridescent center. You can see that tapered chevron down the center. And what I want to do is get down here. The fluff on the bottom of this feather is gray. If it was black, it'd be even better, but usually it's gray because these are natural feathers. I'm going to trim that off just with the last little bit of that fluff left. And then I'll trim a couple little stubs, just an 1/8 inch or so of bare stem on either side, where I've just left those little bristles. And that'll help to anchor this feather in place when I tie it down. Can actually shorten that down a bit. I'm going to tie this feather in with the inside of the feather toward the hook here on the near side, on my near side of the hook, just because I can see it better there. And I want to anchor it tightly in place. Now I'm going to come up and I'm going to make my first turn of hackle here right behind that bead. And you can even kind of jam one in close and then start to spiral wrap the feather back over the body. Just nice evenly spaced turns all the way back to the bend. When I get there, I'm going to pick up my piece of wire and catch that feather. So once I've caught that tip, that feather's not going to go anywhere. I can't let go of my wire yet, but once I've caught that tip, the feather's wrapped. It's tied down. This is just like on an elk or cat. This is the same move. So now I'm going to spiral wrap this wire forward through this hackle. Just evenly spaced turns. And the easiest way to do that without catching all the hackle fibers is just to act like the hackle fibers aren't there. If you try to zigzag your wire and maneuver it around, what happens is the stuff you can see on your near side you miss pretty nicely. But the stuff on the far side that you can't see, you're binding down all the way. So I usually just wrap it like there's nothing there. And then I'll tie that wire off behind the bead as well. And I want to get a good tight anchor on that. And that's one of the nice things about this unithread. That polyester thread doesn't stretch very much, so it makes a nice clean tie off. Then I'll helicopter that piece of wire and I'll just twist it around until it breaks off. And that'll break off flush. Then I'll come in and trim the center stem of that feather at the bend out. Now what I like to do, you can see that hackle standing up pretty good. I like to kind of pinch everything back in place. If you kind of pinch and squeeze, what that'll do is bury that hackle stem deeper into the peacock herl. So I'm just pinching everything. And you can see how that sweeps that back a little bit more. So I'll sweep these front fibers back, and I'm just going to build just enough of a thread head to cover those stubs there behind the bead. And then I'll whip finish. 3 or 4 turns. Give them a spin. I got one crazy one over here I don't like. And again, you can use your dubbing brush to kind of separate those fibers out. We'll add a little shot of head cement in there behind the bead. And I let that kind of wick into the base of the hackle. We've got everything tied down there behind that bead. All of this is very porous material, so it soaks that head cement in nicely. And that is our finished Thinmint. Really a cool fly. You know, much more interesting than a bugger, both in the tying process and the fishing process. But a nice dark pattern that can kind of pick up a few different colors depending on what angle you're looking at. Really multi-toned. So a cool fly. That's the Thinmint. I'm Charlie Craven, and that was my little gift to you for the day. So it's not Christmas, but maybe it's your birthday. Happy birthday. All right, take care. Thanks for watching.